The void of space pressed down upon the shattered colony. The world, once a flourishing haven of humanity, now lay broken beneath the claws of the Krull dominion. The invaders had descended without hesitation, their armadas choking heavens like shadows of death. The citizens of Veos III had screamed into Thevoid, sending signal after signal for salvation. Yet in their hearts, they knew truth help would never come. The Terran Republic had never bled for Theater Rim. Earth's fleet, mighty though it was, rarely risked itself for a single outpost. Not when doing so meant open war with the Krull. Veos III was sacrificial, forgotten. At least, that was the Dominion's certainty. Commander Varak, the scaled overlord leading the conquest, surveyed the captives being dragged into line. His tongue slithered with cruel delight. "Fragile prey," he muttered. "No spirit, no protectors, no salvation." But as the Krull's talons tightened, the air itself shifted. The very air vibrated with an unseen force. Then the heavens dimmed, not by storm or fire, but by something colossal, something unnatural. A fracture of warped space tore open the sky, and from it surged an armada. Not just any fleet, the Terran Supreme Fleet. At its head loomed the Tyrant's Fall, a Leviathan of Firen and vengeance. Its vast hull burned with reflected firelight, its colossalgans humming with the promise of annihilation. Behind it followed dreadnoughts, carriers, and war frigates, each emblazoned with the unbreakable sigil of the Terran Republic. The Krull jeered at first another force, another irritant. Buddha's sensors screamed of impossible firepower. As command nets flooded with desperate warnings, the truth set in. This was no rescue. This was judgment. The Supreme Fleet had not come to talk. It had not come to beg or bargain. It had come to carve a message in ash and ruin. And it would be a message the Krull would never erase. The slaughter ignited before they could even move. The Tyrant's Fall loosed a salvo that split the heavens, annihilating the vanguard ships in incandescent bursts. Rail cannons thundered in precision harmony, shearing through hulls as though they were nothing. Terran fighters struck it through the void like razors, shredding defenses with cold efficiency. The Krull squadrons panicked, shrieking commands that dissolved into chaos. But it was already too late. The Supreme Fleet struck like a pack of wolves, coordinated, unyielding, merciless. The Krull, for all their arrogance and might, had never faced a predator such as this. Humanity did not battle to survive. Humanity didn't battle to claim victory. Humanity battled to annihilate. Commander Varak starred, scales trembling, as his fleet began to die. His fleet was reduced to smoldering wreckage. He had heard whispers of Earth's arsenal, of the Supreme Fleet, but he had dismissed them as myths. The Krull were conquerors. They had broken empires older and far more advanced than the Terrans. But none of them had been like this. None of them had been human. And no, the Krull had committed the gravest error of their existence. They had Matamankin furious. The slaughter above Veos III dragged on, though to call it a battle was generous. It was an execution. Krull vessels burst apart in showers of fire and shrapnel. Their armored hulls shredded by the relentless onslaught of Earth's Supreme Fleet. Squadrons of Terran fighters carved through the void, methodically eradicating stragglers. The once feared hunters of the galaxy were reduced to prey, running in vain. Commander Varak gripped the edges of his tactical dais, claws gouging deep into the steel. His command bunker, buried far beneath the surface, echoed with the shrill panic of officers shouting into their coms, begging for aid, for escape, for anything. But every corridor off retreat had been severed. The Supreme Fleet allowed no reinforcements, no surrender. Varak bared his fangs, trembling with fury. How had they arrived so quickly? A pale-scaled officer near him stammered. When we decoded their signals, Commander, the Supreme Fleet was nowhere near Veos III. They came from Earth itself. Varak spun, eyes wide. You dare tell me they crossed off the galaxy for a mere colony? The officer faltered, then gave a stiff nod. Yes, Commander. Ice pooled in Varek's veins. That journey should have consumed weeks, even for the most sophisticated civilizations. Yet the Terrans had Donitan days. They possessed warp drives beyond reason, and had used them to hunt higher enemy to the edge of the stars. Then the war room shuddered as a news signal cut through, hijacking their network, overriding every crawl channel. Channels. Static howled for a heartbeat before sharpening into an image. A human stood framed in cold light. Not just any human. Grand Admiral Kale Drace, Supreme Commander of the Terran Armada. He wore the black and gold regalia of Earth's fleet, silver hair slicked back with perfect precision, his face carved from ice. "This is Grand Admiral Drace of the Terran Republic," he said, his tone like tempered steel. "Your kind has invaded our colony. You butchered our people, enslaved our kin, and believed no one would answer." He paused, and his gaze cut like a blade. "You were wrong." Varak roared, slamming his claws into the table. "Human, you meddle in Dominion affairs. Withdraw your fleet at once or we will." "You will what?" Drace's voice never rose, but it crushed every word in Varak's throat. "You will threaten us?" "The Supreme Fleet did not come to bargain. We came to end you." The reptilian commander snarled, fangs bared. "You dare defy the Krull Dominion? We are an empire. You cannot prevail." Drace inclined his head, eyes unblinking. "You mistake me, Commander Varak. This is not about victory. This is punishment." The feed snapped black. Varak had no time to react before the heavens themselves ignited. White light erupted across the sky, shaking the world to its core. The war bunker convulsed, walls cracking, monitors exploding as orbital cannons opened fire. Krull cities were vaporized in searing waves, strongholds collapsing into rivers of molten glass. Their factories, their supply yards, their command hubs all obliterated in a storm of fire. Varak staggered forward, horror twisting his features. This was not how humans were supposed to fight. They were supposed to be frail, afraid. Instead, they were executioners. The ground buckled as alarms blared red, officers shrieking in panic. The bombardment was no longer strategic, it was an extermination. Every trace of Krull presence was being erased with merciless precision. Varak lunged for a console, talons slashing at the controls. The holomap sprang alive and his chest tightened. Velos 3 burned. Whole battalions dissolved beneath orbital fire. Terran dropships punched through the atmosphere, deploying shock troopers, giants in black armor, armed with weapons deadlier than anything the Dominion had ever faced. Krull soldiers scrambled to rally, only to be torn apart by invisible strikes. Terran infantry moved like phantoms, hitting from nowhere, vanishing into shadow. Commanders who barked orders vanished mid-sentence, their voices snuffed out by sniper rounds. Varak's breath rattled in his chest. The Dominion had conquered countless worlds, fought countless enemies, but never this. Never an enemy who fought with such cold, methodical fury. A junior officer stumbled to his side, scales pale with terror, yellow eyes wide, scales pale with terror. "Commander, the orbital strikes have breached our lower defenses. The humans, they're coming here." Varak's heart pounded. He turned back to the hollow map. It showed a new fleet of transport ships descending toward their command bunker. They bore the insignia of the Terran Special Forces, a personal strike team. They weren't just here to destroy the Krull forces. They were coming for him. He spun toward his remaining officers. "We evacuate now." But it was already too late. The reinforced doors of the war room exploded inward, the blast throwing several Krull soldiers off their feet. Smoke filled the chamber, and through the haze they emerged. Terran soldiers clad in dark combat armor, their visors glowing a menacing red. They moved with cold mechanical efficiency, gunning down Krull warriors before they could even raise their weapons. Varak reached for his own blade, but something heavy struck him in the chest, forcing him to his knees. He gasped, looking up. On Lido found himself staring into the barrel of a Terran rifle. Behind it stood a soldier, but not just any soldier. Admiral Kale Drace himself. His gaze was unreadable, his expression void of mercy. His rifle remained steady, unshaken. Varak barbeared his fangs. "You think killing me will stop the Dominion? You think we won't retaliate?" Drace's lips curled into something that wasn't quite a smile. "Retaliate." He let the word linger before he leaned in slightly. "Your Dominion has already lost." Varak growled, but Drace continued. "You thought no one would come. You thought we would leave Velos 3 Todi." His voice was calm, but there was something deeper beneath it. Something cold and final. "But here's the thing about humans, Varak." He straightened, his finger tightening on the trigger. "We never forget." The shot rang out and Commander Varak, once a warlord of the Kral Dominion, collapsed lifelessly to the floor. Silence filled the war room. The Terran soldiers didn't cheer, didn't gloat. They simply turned and left. Their work was done. Outside, Velos 3 burned. But this time, it was the Kral who were the ones reduced to ashes. The battle for Velos 3 was over. The Supreme Fleet had done more than win. They had erased the Kral presence from the planet. Smoke still curled from the ruins of Kral war machines, and the air carried the acrid scent of burning wreckage. The once dominant reptilian invaders now lay broken, their bodies scattered like discarded refuse. For the first time in weeks, the sky above Velos 3 was clear. And in that sky, the Tay. Purpose fulfilled. But the galaxy would not forget this day. The Kral Dominion had underestimated humanity, and now they would never make that mistake again. Fires of war still smoldered across Velos 3, but the colony stood victorious. For the first time in weeks, the surviving humans stepped out of their shelters, blinking into the light of a sky no longer dominated by enemy ships. They had heard the bombardments, felt ground shake beneath them, and listened as Kral voices screamed their last desperate orders. But now all was silent. The Supreme Fleet had come, and in its wake, the Kral were gone. Grand Admiral Kale. Drace watched from command outpost as medical teams fanned out through the ruins. Civilians were pulled from underground bunkers, eyes wide with disbelief. Many had expected to die her. Some had already resigned themselves to a slow, agonizing Indunder Kral rule. And yet, humanity had come for them. Drace's eyes scanned Felonscape. Velos 3 had been a prosperous colony once, a beacon of Terran resilience in the Outer Rim. Now it was scarred and battered, its once thriving jitties reduced to husks of steel and stone. The Kral had left nothing untouched. He clenched his fists. This was more than an occupation. This had been extermination. The Supreme Fleet's retaliation had been absolute. But Drace knew this was far from over. The Kral Dominion would not ignore this humiliation. If anything, they would return with fury. Good. Let them come. The Terran Republic had been content to keep to itself, to build its strength in silence, to avoid unnecessary conflicts. But the Kral had mistaken that restraint for weakness. Now humanity had sent a message. Andres intended to make sure the entire galaxy heard it. A soft voice interrupted his doubts. "Sir." He turned to see Captain Dia Reeves standing at attention. Her armor was scratched, her face smudged with soot, but her posture remained straight, disciplined. She had led the first wave of ground forces into the colony, carving through Kral defenses with ruthless efficiency. "The last of the Kral resistance has been wiped out," she reported. "No survivors. The civilians are secure, and the med teams are working on evacuation for Thewendid." Drace nodded, his gaze lingering on the ruins beyond. "Casualties." Reeves hesitated. "We lost over 200 troops in the assault." She paused before adding, "And the colony, it suffered heavy losses. We estimate nearly 70% of the population was wiped out before we arrived." Drace exhaled sharply. It wasn't unexpected, but that didn't make it easier to hear. Reeves continued, her voice tight. They executed most of the leadership days ago publicly. The rest were used as entertainment for the crawl. Drace's jaw tightened. He didn't need to hear the details. He had seen what the crawl did to those they conquered. They thought no one would come, Reeves said quietly. He looked at her. There was something hard in her expression, something deeply personal. She, like so many others, had lost people to the crawl over the years. Humanity had tolerated the Dominion's aggression for too long. Not anymore. Drace turned back to the battlefield. The Supreme Fleet loomed overhead, casting shadows over a planet that had just been reclaimed. But the war was far from over. This isn't just about Veos 3, Hess said finally. The crawl won't let this stand. Reeves nodded. Then what's our next move? Drace didn't answer right away. Instead, he activated his personal Kelman, patched into the fleet-wide channel. All ships, prepare for immediate departure. Velos 3 is secure, but we're not done. There was a brief silence ere the acknowledgements came through. Across the planet, soldiers and officers exchanged glances. There was no question of disobedience, only the anticipation of what came next. Drace turned to Reeves, his voice like steel. We're taking the fight to them. She blinked, but quickly recovered. You mean? Yes. His eyes were dark, filled with something the crawl had never thought possible from their human adversaries. Pure, unrelenting vengeance. We go to war. The war drums of humanity had been silent for too long. Now they thundered across the galaxy. The Supreme Fleet departed Veos 3 as a force of reckoning, its warships cutting through space like celestial blades. The battle for the colony had been just the beginning. A declaration that humanity would no longer stand idle while the Krull Dominion ravaged their people. Their next destination was already chosen. Drace stood on the command deck of the TSF Invictus, staring at the holographic projection of the Krull Dominion's nearest military stronghold. Zartal 9, a fortress world, a key staging ground for Krull. Invasions, the kind of place that would make the Dominion believe itself untouchable. Admiral Drace intended to shatter that illusion. The bridge hummed with activity, officers moving efficiently as they coordinated the fleet's formation. Every soldier aboard knew what this meant. The Supreme Fleet was no longer in a defensive war. This was humanity's contact. Captain Reeves stepped up beside him, her expression sharp, determined. Fleet reports. All systems go. The second wave of reinforcements will rendezvous with us at the edge of Krull space. Drace gave a slow nod. What's the latest on enemy activity? Reeves pulled up a secondary display. Scouts confirmed Zartal 9 is at standard defensive readiness. They don't know we're coming. That was their advantage. The Krull still believed humans would lick their wounds, reinforce their borders, and wait for the next attack. But they had miscalculated. Drace turned to his tactical officer. Deploy stealth recon probes. I want continuous surveillance on Zartal 9's defenses. Any movement, any deviation, I want to know before they do. The officer saluted. Isir. Reeves exhaled. This is going to be different from Velos 3. We were on the defensive there. Now we're invading their territory. Drace's expression didn't change. Good. Reeves arched an eyebrow. You're not worried about overextending? Drace's lips curled slightly. A rare hint of amusement breaking his otherwise grim demeanor. They underestimated us once. They'll do it again. He turned to her, his voice dropping lower. And when they realize what's happening, it'll already be too late. The Supreme Fleet pressed forward, slipping into the darkness between stars, moving like a predator in the void. Humanity had come for its own. Now it was coming for blood. The Supreme Fleet arrived at the edge of Krull-controlled space, hidden within the shadow of a dense nebula. The void stretched endlessly before them, broken only by the distant glow of Zartal 9, a fortress world that had never been touched by war until now. Admiral Dre stood in the dim light of the TSF Invictus war room, surrounded by his senior officers. A massive holographic display flickered in the center, showing real-time surveillance of the planet. ZARTL-9 was heavily fortified. Planetary defense cannons, orbital shipyards, and entire legions of Crawl warriors patrolled its surface. It wasn't just a military base. It was a symbol of Dominion power. Captain Reeves folded her arms, studying the map. A full frontal assault would be suicide. Drace nodded. That's why we're not doing that. He tapped a command into the interface, and the holographic display shifted, highlighting key points across the planet's defenses. The Crawl think we'll attack them like they attack us. Overwhelming force, brute strength. His voice was calm, measured. We're going to do the opposite. A low murmur of anticipation rippled through the room. Reeves leaned in. A surgical strike? Exactly. Drace's eyes gleamed. Their planetary defenses are automated, but command protocols are handled from inside their primary control station. Here, he pointed to a fortress embedded within the mountains. We take that out, their entire planetary shield network collapses. Then our fleet can wipe them out from orbit. A tactical officer frowned. They'll have elite guards protecting that station. If we send a ground team in, they won't make it out alive. Drace gave a small, dangerous smile. That's why I'm leading it myself. The room went silent. Reeves stared at him. Sir. He held up a hand. I know what you are going to say. She took a step closer, voice low. Then you know it's insane. You're the Supreme Fleet's commander. You don't lead ground assaults normally? No, Drace admitted. But this isn't a normal war anymore. The Crawl think we hide behind our ships and fight from a distance. They think we fear them. He leaned forward, eyes burning. They need to see that we don't. Reeves exhaled sharply, but didn't argue further. She knew better than anyone. When Drace made a decision, it was final. The war room fell into motion. Orders were issued. Strike teams were assembled. The Supreme Fleet moved into position. And within the hour, Drace was in full battle gear, standing aboard a dropship as it hurtled toward Zartel-9. His hands clenched into fists. The Crawl thought their fortress world was untouchable. They were about to learn that when humans go to war, nothing is beyond their reach. The dropship rocked as it pierced Zartel-9's upper atmosphere, cutting through layers of thick, turbulent clouds. Below, Pfeffertre's world stretched out in a jagged sprawl of war factories, garrisoned outposts, and towering citadels carved into the black rock of the planet's surface. The Crawl had made this world into an unbreakable stronghold. Admiral Drace was here to break it. Inside the dropship's cramped interior, the strike team sat in silence, weapons gripped tight. They were the best humanity had. Veterans of 100 battles, hardened killers who had seen the worst of war and survived. Their faces were calm, focused. There was no need for last-minute speeches. They all knew the stakes. Captain Reeves sat across from Drace, checking her rifle one last time. Her expression was unreadable, but Drace could see the tension in her shoulders. She wasn't happy about him being here. Bombardment. The Supreme Fleet had fired on a Crawl outpost miles away, setting off a chain of explosions that lit up the horizon. The distraction was instant. Sirens blared as Crawl forces scrambled, their attention drawn to the distant attack. Drace didn't waste a second. Go, the strike team surged forward. Moving with lethal precision, silenced rifles spat death as Crawl sentries fell before they could sound the alarm. The team hit the gate, planting charges and ducking back just as the explosive ascended in a flash of searing heat. They were in. The control station was just ahead, a towering structure pulsing with energy. This was the nerve center of Zartel-9's defenses, the key to bringing the entire fortress to its knees. Drace led the charge, cutting through Crawl soldiers with brutal efficiency. Plasma fire lit up the night as the humans tore their way through the facility's corridors, leaving bodies in their wake. Then, as they reached the core chamber, an alarm screamed through structure. Reinforcements were coming. Drace's jaw tightened. They had minutes, maybe less, before the entire Crawl garrison descended on them. Hell locked eyes with Reeves. "Get it done." She nodded, already moving to the control terminal, fingers flying over the alien interface. "Almost there. Just keep them off me." Drace turned to the entrance just as the first wave of Crawl warriors stormed in. He raised his rifle. "Let them come." The Crawl warriors stormed into the chamber, their guttural war cries echoing against the metal walls. Their massive armored bodies moved with terrifying speed, plasma rifles raised, claws flexing in anticipation of tearing apart their human prey. Drace didn't hesitate. He squeezed the trigger, his rifle barking with rapid bursts of fire. The first Crawl in the doorway dropped. Its chest cavity shredded by hypervelocity rounds. Another followed, but Drace had already moved, rolling behind a terminal as enemy fire scorched the air where he had just stood. His strike team was right behind him. Sergeant Voss, a towering soldier built like a war machine, unleashed a stream of gunfire that sent 2 Crawl warriors sprawling. Lieutenant Harris lobbed a flash grenade into the hallway. The sudden burst of light disorienting the charging enemies long enough for the team to reposition. But the Crawl kept coming. Drace ducked behind cover as a plasma bolt seared past his helmet, close enough to make his skin prickle from the heat. He risked a glance toward Reeves. "How much longer?" he barked. Reeves cursed under her breath, working furiously at the Crawl control panel. "Their security protocols are a nightmare. I need another 60 seconds. They didn't have 60 seconds. The Crawl were adapting fast, falling into a disciplined formation, firing in coordinated bursts. Drace's soldiers threatened fire, but they were being pushed back, forced into a tighter defensive position. And then the heavy footsteps came. A Crawl warlord stepped into view, a towering monstrous figure covered in reinforced armor plating. The creature carried a massive power axe, its edges humming with deadly energy. Its cold reptilian eyes locked onto Drace. "You will not leave this place, Liv." "Human." Its voice was deep, guttural, filled with absolute certainty. Drace narrowed his eyes. "You talk too much." The warlord roared and charged. Drace moved fast, raising his rifle and firing directly at the beast's face. The shots sparked against the Crawl's thick armor, but barely slowed it down. In a single terrifying swing, the warlord's axe cleaved through the console Drace had been using for cover, sending debris flying. Drace rolled away, drawing his sidearm. He fired 3 precise shots, aiming for the gaps in the warlord's armor. One hit home, sinking into the creature's exposed neck, drawing a snarl of pain, but not stopping it. The Crawl swung again. Drace barely dodged as the axe tore through the floor where he had been a second before. The sheer force of the impact sent a shockwave through Therum, knocking over a nearby terminal. Sparks rained down. Voss tried to intervene, unleashing a barrage of fire into the warlord's back, but the beast simply turned and swung its axe with brutal force. The blade caught Voss across the chest, carving through armor. The sergeant staggered, blood pouring from the wound. Drace roared in fury and lunged forward. With one fluid motion, he holstered his pistol and pulled his combat knife. He ducked under Thewelord's next swing, closing the distance before the massive alien could recover. Then he struck. The blade plunged into the Crawl's throat, twisting deep. The warlord's eyes widened in shock. It tried to speak, butanely gurgled as black blood poured from the wound. Drace didn't give it a chance to retaliate. He yanked the knife free and drove it in again, this time straight through the beast's skull. The warlord collapsed. The remaining Crawl warriors hesitated. For the first time, they looked uncertain. And that was all the opportunity Drace's team needed. Push forward, Reeves shouted, her voice cutting through the chaos. I've got control of the system. The entire facility shuddered as she activated the override sequence. Alarms blared, warning lights flashing red. Outside, the planetary defense grid flickered, its power surging wildly. Then silence. A moment later, Dracecom unit crackled to life. This is Invicta's command. We are reading a full system shutdown. The planet's shields are down. Drace grinned. Then burn this place to the ground. Above them, the Supreme Fleet descended like an avenging storm. Within seconds, the sky was filled with fire. Zarl 9 burned. From the sky, the Supreme Fleet rained destruction upon Thephatra's world, hammering its now defenseless surface with relentless orbital strikes. Explosions rippled across the planet's strongholds, war factories, and military installations. The Crawl, once so confident in their unbreakable defenses, had nowhere to hide. Drace and his team stood atop the ruined control station, watching the end unfold. Firestorms raged across the distant citadels, the once mighty Crawl fortifications collapsing under their relentless assault. Their empire had relied on intimidation, on fear, on the belief that no one would dare strike at their heart. Humanity had shattered that illusion. Drace tapped his comm. Fleet status report. Admiral Hensley's voice came through, steady and satisfied. Crawl forces are in full retreat. Their fleet tried to regroup, but we cut them down before they could escape. Zarl 9 eyes ours. Ours. Drace exhaled, glancing at Reeves, who was staring at the sky, her face unreadable. The others were silent, taking in the magnitude of what they had just done. The Crawl had ruled through terror, conquering, enslaving, wiping out entire species. They had believed themselves invincible. Now they knew fear. A sharp crackle on the comms broke the silence. It wasn't from their fleet. It was a broadcast, one coming from deep inside Crawl space. The voice that spoke was strained, angry, but filled with something Drace had never heard from the Crawl before. Desperation. Humans. The guttural voice of a Crawl. High Commander growled through the static. You have sealed your fate. We will answer this act of war with annihilation. You cannot comprehend the storm you have unleashed. Drace chuckled, shaking his head. He let the Crawl talk. Let them try to muster whatever was left of their arrogance. When they finished, he finally spoke, his voice calm, steady, undeniable. We understand perfectly, he paused. The question is, do you? The transmission cut out. The Crawl had no answer because for the first time in their history, they weren't the ones doing the conquering. For the first time, they were the ones being hunted.